Welcome, everybody, to our 8th Lift Up Women in Life Sciences live event. Rosey, I can't believe that we are back for our 8th live event. So thank you so much for everybody that's been a part of this journey. And if you are completely new to joining the Lift Up Women in Life Sciences community group, then our mission statement here as a team of ambassadors is about connecting, championing, and inspiring women right across the life sciences industry, from academia all the way through to C-suite. And since we launched this in September last year, on the back of leveraging off some phenomenal relationships that we've got here at Fraser Dove within the life sciences space, we have seen this community group grow month on month, which has been fantastic. And with that in mind, actually, I noticed this morning we've had just over 20,000 global views of our live broadcasts. So again, thank you for all those that have been on the journey, that are resharing some of the content, that are rewatching the videos, or just joining us for the first time today. So before we bring in some phenomenal key speakers on our hot topic today, which is how to burn bright without burning out, a serious hot topic that we're hearing and seeing in the marketplace at the moment, I will do a very quick introduction into myself, and then my co-host Rosey Grant will do the same. So I am Louise Williams. I'm the operations director here at Fraser Dove International, and I've been with the business for coming up to 2 years in July. I've been in staffing for around 18 years and 9 years within life sciences, specifically where I focused on medical and clinical recruitment before moving into management, director, and leadership roles. So that's a little bit about me. Rosey, I'm going to pass this over to you to do a quick introduction.
Yes. Hi. Thank you, everyone, for joining us again today. I was worried I wasn't going to be able to be a part of it because I nearly faced some technical issues there. But I'm here, and I'm hopefully you can hear me loud and clear. But my name obviously is Rosey. I've been at Fraser Dove for 2.5 years now, and prior to that was a part of Boston Scientific, where I had the opportunity to have some amazing female mentors, coaches, and leaders. And so really driven to make this an opportunity for everyone within the life sciences. But it seems like we've got a few people saying hi. As you know, today's forum is alive. Your audience can interact, and we've got people coming and joining us already. Now, if you'd like to interact, please say hello and say happy to connect. We want to know where you're coming from, where you work, and what function you work in too. Some people coming in now. Good, excited to hear this from Stephanie. Stephanie, thank you for joining us. We'd love to know where you're coming in from the world. As Louise said, we've had over 20,000 views across our lives now and counting. And it all happens because of the wonderful people that join us from all over the world.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. So I think Rosie's done a fantastic intro, and I think that just something to bear in mind as well as we move throughout this interactive session is that if you've got some questions that you would like to ask our key speakers today, then pop a Q at the start of your question within the news feed and the comments, just so it makes it really easy for both Rosey and I to navigate that through the news feed. So without further ado, I think we'd love to bring in Andrea Walton. So Andrea, thank you for joining us today. Would
Thank you
you
so much.
would you kindly do an introduction to the audience for us?
Sure. Andrea Walton. I am the Chief People and Culture Officer over at Bluebird Bio in Boston, Massachusetts. I have been in the HR space over 20 years and have spanned and done different roles within HR. I've worked for some big consumer packaged good companies. There's been the Coca-Colas, the Nestle's, the Targets. I spent some time in the ed tech space and now in biotech, my first tour of duty in biotech, and I love it. I'm also a self-published author. I've written 2 books. The latest is called All the Smoke from Pain to Purpose. And it resonates today with today's topic because I talk about being the survivor of domestic abuse and navigating my career while going through that and how that shaped me into the leader that I am today. So really excited to share today.
Thank you, Andrea, and your story is truly inspiring. So thank you for sharing that. And we'd love to bring in Janet as well. So Janet Stevens, it's lovely to have you here today.
Good to be here. So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody. As Louise said, my name is Janet Stevens. I am currently the lead of my own consulting firm focusing on quality and operations excellence in the pharma and medical device technology areas. My career is kind of circuitous. I am an engineer by trade, but have spent over 30 years in the pharmaceutical manufacturing and medical device manufacturing space. And so this topic is very important today because my previous roles included being Chief Quality Officer at Hillrom, and I was also VP of Quality Operations at Pfizer, where I had global responsibilities for all of the sterile injectable pharmaceutical manufacturing sites globally. So, trying to not burn out when you're managing a global organization is very important. Not only was it important to me, but the staff that then worked for me. I also am very passionate about the life sciences field, particularly for women, because there are not a lot of us in that space. So I also take time to mentor young professionals as well as young students to go into the STEM career fields. And happy to be here today.
Thank you, Janet. Thank you for that introduction. Again, really inspiring, and what a career journey. So I'm hoping that throughout this broadcast, please again pop a queue in front of your questions, audience, because I think both these ladies have got phenomenal stories and experiences to share. So Andrea, I'm going to come to you first, if you don't mind. Just a quick sort of brief question here. What was the purpose, I guess, and what was your reason for joining the Lift Up community group? Why was it important for you?
It's important for me, one, because I believe that my purpose on earth is to empower and lift up young women and teen moms and women of color and women in general. And so when I was reached out to by Rosey to share my story, the book that was just released, and of course, my career journey, it just made sense to talk about this topic today. So I'm so grateful to be a part of it. And that is ultimately why I'm here today.
Thank you, Andrea. And coming to you, Janet, similar question. Why was it important for you to join the Lift Up community?
As I said earlier, I'm very passionate about women in the life sciences field. And, as I said at the outset, I've been in this career path for now over 30 years. And when I started, there weren't a lot of women who looked like me, and there weren't a lot of women. And still, at this kind of juncture, um, unfortunately, the numbers still look relatively the same. And so when I was asked to kind of share my journey, be a part of a women's group to bring more people in, to not only break the glass ceiling, but to let others in as well, then I felt it was, again, as Andrea said, part of my purpose as well.
Yeah. Thank
That's
you, Janet.
brilliant.
Yeah.
I think it's an underlying thing that I like what you said there, Janet, about it is about breaking your own glass ceiling, but it's something I think Andrew says, our CCO, is dropping the ladder down and
Yes.
getting the next generation in too, right? Because you did all that hard work to get through it.
Mhm.
What can we do to make it a little bit easier for everyone else?
Absolutely.
And we've got more people joining us now. We've got a LinkedIn user due to privacy settings, but coming in from Germany, which is really exciting. You are all inspiring. Happy to connect from Stepana. Thanks for joining us. Stephanie has told us she's from the middle spot between New York and Boston in Connecticut. I think we usually get quite a lot of people from the US. We've also got Canada coming in, which is really exciting. And of
Yeah.
course, as well, the UK. So hi, Chris. Oh,
Well, and Stephanie's on my team at Bluebird. So
Oh, lovely.
I got some representation from the
Nice.
home team.
I
Yeah.
love that. I
Yeah,
love that.
yeah, that is lovely. We have got an
Oh,
awful lot coming through. Yeah, we've got
yeah.
Holly Church. Hello, Holly. Thank you. Great for you to be here as well. I think we got Nachala, if I pronounced that right. I hope I have. Good afternoon to you. Thank you for joining us today. And we've also got Carla as well from California. So please keep them coming through. As Rosey said, we've got a phenomenal amount, and it's lovely to hear from you. It's a great way of just building a connection and a network. So we're going
Yeah,
to
I'm just
kickstart.
smiling.
Sorry,
Sorry, I was
are you
just
smiling?
smiling there at the fact. From that, we've had people come in from Denmark, Boston, Paris, California,
Wow.
Bulgaria. So we are fully global right now. So yeah, let's crack on, Louise. Over to you.
Excellent. Okay, so I'm gonna sort of jump to a question which I've spoken to a lot of individuals in the marketplace in the last couple of weeks, and setting boundaries is one that's really come up here. A lady called Heather Moses, who's at AstraZeneca, heads up Canada and sort of European regions in oncology. She said, to say no to additional work, we can be very capable pleasers. It's easy to become gobbled up by an organization when workload is theoretically infinite, and it's up
Mhm.
to us to set some boundaries. So I'm not sure there's a direct question that kind of correlates to that. In this digitally enabled global workforce that we live within, how do we set boundaries and isolate time to fully disconnect? If you're leading and managing teams and you're
Right.
based in
Mhm.
Europe, you've got teams in the US,
Okay.
at what point do you kind of just put that phone or laptop down and not connect? So what's your thoughts in around that? I'll come
Yeah.
to you first, Andrea.
Yeah, sure, sure. First of all, and I think we've talked about this in the pre-call, it's to me, it's all about self-care and prioritization of setting boundaries. And when you set boundaries, it doesn't mean that you stop things that are good for you from coming in, but you do keep things that are not good for you from setting up shop where you need to set boundaries. So for my team and our organization, what we do is make sure, one, that our folks are enabled through our talent strategy. So I think it's two sides of one coin, setting the right talent strategies to make sure that folks have operational excellence, operational competence. You're clear about work. It clears the path so there's no churn. But for me, I've always been a people pleaser in my career. I'll speak for myself. It's important that you have to set boundaries.
Yeah.
And just because you can doesn't mean you should. So at night, when you are getting ready to have dinner and hang out with your family, sometimes you've got to put the phone away and put the laptop away. Now, we know as leaders and being in the marketplace, there are projects and things that you may need to work on that are exceptions, but it should not be the rule. And you've got to take care of yourself.
100%. I think, yeah, self-care is a big term within that. And actually,
Huge.
what you just said there reminded me, of something that Karen Mullen in our last live broadcast had said around being present in the moment. And I
Yes.
think with the evening time and putting your phone down or turning your laptop off or switching it off, it's so important to allow that time then when you're with your family or with your other half or whatever it may well be, that you're present in that moment, and
Right.
you're switching off. So
You,
yeah, I
yeah.
completely
You
agree.
don't get that time back.
No,
And
absolutely.
in my 20 plus years, there have been times where I sacrificed that family time for work. And now that I'm in this place in my career and in my life, my kids are growing. I have two adult kids. One was logged on, Nikayla, who's
Oh, oh,
22,
lovely.
and
Okay.
and then I have a 10-year-old son, and that time is important to me. And you don't get it back. So establishing boundaries for your mental health, for your
Hmm.
physical health, but also to demonstrate and model that behavior for your team is just as important.
Yeah,
Completely agree.
I would say though, it's also important to communicate what your boundaries are to your
Yes.
team members and maybe have a discussion with your manager. Because what I find is sometimes women even do it more than I would say our male counterparts in terms of not setting the boundaries. And I don't know if that comes from us being mothers or caregivers or who we are as beings. And it is very important that your manager and your team members understand what those boundaries are and that they understand it. It's not that I'm not interested in doing the work, but you
Hmm.
have to create boundaries for yourself, right? And
Right.
particularly young women who may not be mothers yet, right? Sometimes that privilege is not given to people who are upstarting in their career when they're not mothers versus those who may have to go to a soccer game or those
Hmm.
kind of things. So it's really important that the boundaries are communicated, particularly in a global workforce, right? Because I was living in the US in Chicago and my team members were in India. So we're
Hmm.
talking about an 11 and a half hour time difference. And so
Yeah.
there must be some sacrifices you have to make. So my day started at 6:30 a.m., but my
Yes.
day was finished maybe at 2:30. So I think you have to be able to manage your boundaries, but also very communicate them very well.
Communicate them
Yeah.
very well. Yeah. And I think there is also an element of awareness that potentially if you are a
Yes,
leader, that if you are, I think this is something we previously discussed, but if you are, messaging somebody out of hours or it's late,
Right.
then
yes,
you're kind of setting that tone, and potentially a lot of the team members feel like they've got to respond. So I think
Absolutely.
you've got to be aware of, as a leader, your actions, I think.
Yeah, no, you
Yeah.
teach people how to treat you. And so, and that's for leaders and employees. And so to your point, as a leader, it's not okay for me to send an email to my team after hours or super early. And if I do send it, I
Yeah,
set in my Outlook that it sends at a very specific
perfect
time
time.
so it doesn't disrespect
Yeah.
kind of their home and work and life as well. So absolutely.
Hmm. Yeah.
You have
Yeah.
to model the behavior. Otherwise, they will think you don't mean it because
That's
as a leader, they want to please you as well because they want to do well. You have to
that's right.
model.
That's right.
100%, 100%. No, and I think with that in mind, another from a team perspective, I thought this was a really interesting question that had been asked me earlier was, how do you identify those in your team that are burning out? You know, is it easily recognizable? Now, you know, I think I've shared some recent statistics. I think Asana that was statistically recorded some data through Forbes for 2022 was like 70% of, you know, key kind of workers globally were facing burnout, which is a pretty shocking
Yeah.
statistic. And we are seeing more than ever that burnout correlating through to depression in in some
Mhm.
stages. So, you know, it's important, I think, as an employer, as a leader, as a manager as well, that we're kind of aware of those signs.
That's right.
So through your experience, I guess, from in the environments, and obviously chief of people as well at Bluebird, what signs do you look for, and what encouragement would you create internally from a culture or a solution or an initiative to help combat that? And
I'll
I'll come to you, Angela.
Sure. I'll start with the latter first.
Hmm.
As I mentioned earlier, it's important that the strategy for the team and the organization not only enables the work that we're doing, but enables the team. And so, one of the strategies that we have is amplifying culture through the work that we do. And that includes mental health resources, engaging the team, having the right conversations about total rewards, flexible schedules, having those conversations to make sure that one, does the manager and or employee have the head count they need to do the work? Has
Hmm.
the role grown? Having those very tactical conversations. When it comes to kind of the signs to spot, absolutely. If you are plugged in and keyed into your team, you know when someone is not being their best. And it could be either work is causing burnout, or it could be something outside of work that's causing burnout. But having a question on, can I take work off your plate? Is there something happening that you need my support on? Being human in that moment. I remember having those moments myself of struggling with things happening outside, navigating the things that were happening domestically in my home while navigating the corporate ladder, and having folks that came up to me and said, how can I help? What can I do? Recognizing the team for their effort. There's so many things. So, not forgetting that we are all on the same team, having the right strategy to help support the team, but and then of course checking in with your team to make sure that they have what they need to not only execute at work, but any resources they need at home, we can provide that too, or give them the space to do that.
Yeah, completely. No, that's a brilliant response. And Janet, I'll come to you with the same question. Is there anything to add to that, do you feel?
I think some of the signs that are easily recognizable, you can see when your team members may become short
Yeah,
when they're interacting with people, or maybe we've gone through some strategic initiative where we can't hire any more headcount, but the work doesn't change, right? Because that's a
mhm,
very real issue.
yeah,
And I think, to what Andrea said, as a leader, you want to talk to your team. Are you okay? And give them the space to vent. So when they're venting, if they trust you as a leader, this is not about your performance review. We're not doing that
that's right.
discussion right now. We're just having a conversation about the realities of what you're dealing with in your workplace or
Mm,
outside of your workplace, and give them a safe space to vent. And that does not negate the fact that whatever work has to get done does have to get done. But the idea is to give them a sense we're doing it together. I was the leader that, I mean, I have to do the work too. So whatever I can do to support, to help. I mean, if I
mhm,
have to get in and, I always used to use the term, we all got to get our hands dirty to get the work done.
That's
So
right.
it does me being in the C suite or the chief quality officer or the VP doesn't excuse me from having to do the work as well. And
Yeah.
you'll see that a lot. Maybe not with the VP level, but the stress really is in the middle,
Yeah.
right? That's where the pressure is between
Yes.
the
Abs-
organization and the organization.
Yeah.
That's yeah. Sorry,
Yeah,
I
Rosie,
was
you go.
just I was just going to say I'd love to hear from the audience if there's any experiences they've faced where either they've reached burnout and they possibly
Mhm.
have a question for how to handle that or how to approach a senior leader, because I know, I'm at the beginning of my career, and I know that sometimes asking for help makes you feel like maybe, oh, you're not capable of doing the work, and
Yeah.
that's really not the case. That's just maybe your workload,
Mhm.
it needs to be altered, or you need support in one piece that would have a domino effect on the rest of your work. So
Mhm.
I'm gonna send out and ask the audience, asking for their
Yeah.
thoughts
Yeah.
and questions on to do with burnout. Is there particular ways you feel um, you need help in asking for that support?
Mhm.
Yeah, if I could too, and just weigh in, I think another aspect of this is when we look at it from a DEIB perspective, there are employees who don't feel like they can bring their whole selves to work. And so, to Janet's earlier point about making sure that you have a relationship with your manager so you can have those conversations, there could be things happening outside that is creating the burnout. Whether it's, my goodness, here in the US with some of the mass shootings or hate crimes or things that you are seeing on the screen where you have to bring with you to work and still perform, although you could be having some stressors about that. So building that relationship with your team and with your employee is
Yeah.
important, so they feel like they can trust you to bring their whole selves and say, I'm not okay. I know we have work to do, but I am not okay in this moment.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
and
completely agree. I think, yeah, sorry, Rosie, you go.
Nikita Sharma's just
Mhm.
shared, and I think this is a key point. It's saying so right. It's psychological safety is also important
Yes.
for
Yeah.
people to speak
Absolutely.
without any fears, and I think it's
Yes.
part of creating that environment where people feel like they're able to ask for help,
I,
Yes.
or
I,
even just to
yeah,
understand when people want a solution and when they just want a shoulder. There's a
I
big
completely
difference.
agree. I wonder and I question how much of businesses actually take the time out to actually just ask their employees like how they are. I mean, I bet that just, my gut feeling is that that doesn't happen enough.
Yeah.
I think that people can get so consumed in work and the role or the content of the job, or but then that's where the pressure then feels piled in, and then that relationship's not always built.
But,
um
but,
but
but
I
Louise, I think it also comes down to the leadership, because when you think
Yes.
about a whole company, a CEO can ask tens of thousand employees in that way where it's meaningful. He can ask, or she can ask, how is
Yeah.
Mm,
everybody doing? But as leaders, it,
Yes.
as a people leader, it is your role to definitely produce operational results. To me, that's a given, and that's on the side. But the people aspect is the real key, because when people leave jobs, they don't leave because of always the company. It's who they
Yeah.
work for, right?
Hmm.
Or who they report to. So as leaders, we have to make sure we have enough bandwidth, not only to produce the results, but to engage with our team as people.
Listen.
Yeah, and
Yes.
listen.
Absolutely.
And what I try
it's
to, I saw it last week with someone I gave some advice to, and their boss wasn't the most welcoming in terms of wanting to listen. And my suggestion is then you have to find at least one person. And if
Yeah.
that one person is a coworker, and it doesn't have to be in your field, if it's a coworker,
Completely agree.
somebody you
Mm.
can vent to, that you can bounce ideas off of, or a mentor that can
Yes.
yeah.
help navigate some of the dilemmas that you might face when you're experiencing that burnout.
Yeah, I
We've
Absolutely.
had
think
a question come in. I mean, this is great discussion, but it kind of links obviously into what we're
got,
talking about.
we've got
So,
lots coming through.
Michael wants to understand what's the best way, in your opinion and experience, to ask for support in a situation where managers aren't super supportive about that self care. And I wanted to jump it in there because I know you were talking about going to a coworker and mentor. So, Janet, I'll come straight to you on that one
Okay.
first.
Yeah, what I would suggest, Michael, is when you have talk to your manager, I think it's very important to ask them what their expectation is, right? So that you both are aligned on what they expect and then what you believe you can deliver. And if there is that disconnect, then have a real honest conversation about it, about where you're coming from and what they're expecting, and see where that gets you. And I think sometimes, and Andrea can speak to it as well, a lot of times we don't ask our managers, what are your expectations? We make assumptions. And
Yeah,
so then you never move past to the real discussion that's needed to happen. And then it doesn't happen until you're doing your performance review.
that's
You
right.
have to
Wow.
have those discussions constant and upfront.
Yeah.
I mean, spot on. It's having those discussions. I couldn't have said it better. And only thing I would layer on is if you don't feel like you can have a conversation with your manager, that's where you can go to your people partner
Yep.
and talk with HR and say, look, I have tried everything. I'm trying to get clarity. I'm not, I need some help making some inroads here and partnering that way. But absolutely. I think in the absence of information, people make assumptions. And the
Yep.
best way to solve that is to have the right conversations about managing expectations, roles, and responsibilities. Because sometimes the burnout can come from you think your responsibility is X, and the manager's like, I didn't ask you to do that. So, so having the right conversation is important.
Yep.
Do you know
Yeah.
what? I love the dynamic we've got here because obviously, Janet, you've got your experience in leading from an operational standpoint and being that manager, and then we've obviously got
Mhm.
Andrea who's
Yeah.
leading from the people side. So it's like we've got the two partners in a business, and we
Yeah.
can get both opinions. It leads us on quite nicely to a question that's come in from Holly. Holly, thanks for your question. But obviously, Holly's had experience with some burnout. Always feeling she has to work harder because she didn't have a certain qualification, for example. So she wants to understand, how do you know when to slow down before burning out? So maybe what do you think are those initial intrinsic signs that you need to take a step back?
Is that for you want me to
Yep.
start? Oh,
Andrea,
yeah.
you go first.
Uh,
Apologies.
listen to your body. I
Yep.
will tell you that my body was shutting down because I was burned out and depressed. And so, if you're not, we talked about this self care. If you're not, and I'll even encourage you or any other person that's listening to maybe in the same space, even going to see your doctor to talk about, is it because I'm not sleeping? Is it because my iron is low? Is it because I'm depressed? But listening to your body will tell you, oh yeah, I need to slow down. Because if you don't, your body will slow down for you. Your
Hmm.
body, your body will say, you know what, I'm
Gives
exhausted
up.
and I need
Yeah.
to move. So listening to you, listening to your body, and even those that are close to you who are noticing signs like, hey, you're usually this, but you've changed a little bit. Really kind of keying into those folks that love and care about you and want to see the best for you. So take care of yourself. You got one body, you got one life, and we need to live it out the best way that we can. So listen to your body, please.
Yeah.
Amazing.
And
Yeah.
I would add on to that, Holly, is, I'm leaning on the first part of the statement about a certain qualification. And here's what I would say to you. Sometimes with that self-care, we have to give ourselves grace, right?
Yes,
So I understand how you may feel you have to work harder, but if you have the role, then you've done the work, right? And so, unless they are, your management is saying something specifically about that qualification, then don't let your self doubt about it
that's
weigh
right.
you down, right?
Hmm.
So, to me, if you're doing the job well, if your management has let you have the role, then that qualification, I don't want to say it becomes null and void, but
Mm.
you've crossed the biggest hurdle, and give
Yes.
Yeah.
yourself that grace to say that you have.
And not putting too
Yeah.
much pressure on
Yeah,
yourself, isn't
and
it?
putting
Because I
too much
think,
pressure on yourself. Absolutely.
yeah, I mean, I think we've got a lot of people that completely agree with these statements.
Mhm.
100% agree. Rosemary, thank you. It's lovely to have you back, Rosemary. She's a regular on our live broadcast.
Oh, nice.
So lovely to have you here. You know, grace. So obviously we've got a LinkedIn privacy settings there. We've got communication is key from Michael, and take care of yourself. Absolutely love it. And thank you for sharing this, Nikita. I learned this a big lesson after a complete crash, and it was too late.
Yes.
But
Yes.
you're right. You've got one life, you've got one body. I do believe that your body often gives you those signs, quite
Absolutely.
early. So you've just got to listen, I think, to them, because often or not, you're constantly driving towards what you feel is higher performance, or
Yeah.
the more that you're doing is just it's for the greater good. But actually, you end up, your performance drops because you're more
Exactly.
stressed.
Absolutely.
You're in this downward cycle. So it's not good for the long run. But thank you. We've got an awful lot of comments and questions and things like that coming into the news feed. I think there's a good one here from our CCO. Too many work dynamics are a parent-child in style, which is why people don't fully open up, which is
Yeah.
interesting. I think we do see that in a workplace, but whether you're getting that from your leader or your manager, I think, as you both identified, that having somebody internally that you could, even if it's a co-worker, that you can go and talk to or open up or download, whether it's a lunch break, whatever it is, I think that really helps.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
So
a,
yeah,
and
it does. And just to layer on, we've come so far. The fact that we're even having this conversation, I know when
Yeah,
I first started in the workforce,
sure.
no one cared about your well-being. It was like, get this
just get
done.
on with it.
And if you brought it up, it was a problem. And
Yep.
Yeah,
and what I love about the multi-generational workforce is that it forces us to have these important conversations,
Yep.
because I have two daughters. One is a millennial and one is a Gen Z, and they are like they don't put up with there's no
Anything.
balance or mental health. Even Nikayla, who's in the feed now, recently said to me,
yeah,
Mom, when I start working, I need to have a mental health day every Friday. And I said,
That's right. Right. That's right.
so the conversations that a multi-generational workforce is forcing us to have is the right one, because I'm a Gen Xer and it was all about performance and
That's
yeah.
right.
proving yourself. And so I'm just happy that we are at a place where we can talk about well-being within the confines of work and performance.
Absolutely.
and
And
I
actually
think you're. I
mm,
was just going to say, I think you're so right, because the generational difference with talent is astronomical. We had a summer intern last year who did actually a study on this in our network for her internship, and it was amazing how people have moved from what you're kind of saying there, that achievement based
Yes.
career style, to purpose and impact. And
Yes.
no longer does everyone want to get that promotion and then get
That's
a
right.
house with white fences outside and a dog and have two kids and then get married. It's all actually, every day when I wake up, what am I doing and how am I making a difference?
That's it.
Right. And
That's it.
I think that's just,
belonging.
And I think it's not even how it's in addition, am I happy personally?
yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
So
Yes.
so
Yes.
again, Andrea was right. When we came up, it was these are the results, put on the blue suit, go to
Yes.
work, and whether it's how we appear at work, being more comfortable, being more casual, to what COVID caused us to be able to work remotely, and am I happy in my job? And if they
Yes.
are not happy, they will leave, right?
Absolutely.
Mhm.
I'm not
Yeah,
going to stay 30 years and get a pension. It that dynamic has changed. And
yeah,
so again, to even talk about the word burnout, that was
Yes.
like
yeah.
you do not
yeah.
have
You
this
just couldn't.
discussion 20
That's,
years ago to
that's right.
now talk about it and talk about ways to not get there, right?
So,
Absolutely.
so I'm interested to get your thoughts on this one then. So, do you think, statistics are showing us that people are feeling burnt out, and that this has skyrocketed over the past few years? Obviously, data from last year was quite frightening. So, why
Yeah.
do you think this is? Do you think it is because people are generally talking about it more than ever, because they're feeling more comfortable to talk about it, and therefore it's being recorded, and statistically we're measuring it? Or do you think it's a post-pandemic, maybe working from home? I mean, I know I was pregnant through second pregnancy through the last pandemic, and I worked from home pretty much full time from
Mhm.
that March time. And I remember sometimes sitting there working for 4 hours solid without even standing up, and like going downstairs to get a coffee. I was so consumed with work. And then, sometimes I was like, oh, well, I've only got to go downstairs, so I'll do an extra half an hour. And then before I knew it, I was actually working really long hours at home
Yes.
and not actually getting up and about and moving anywhere near like I did when I was in an office.
Right.
So I don't know whether that has had an impact. I don't know. I'll just get interested to get your thoughts, and maybe Andrea, I'll come to you first.
Sure. So first, as we all know, the pandemic ushered in, to your point, hours and hours of working and increased productivity, but not necessarily an increased
Right.
level of engagement. So just because you had more productivity doesn't mean that you have folks that were just as committed. That
Mhm.
also sparked the Great Resignation because employers weren't listening to employees anymore. It was, sure, you can work 40, 50 hours. Sure, this can still get done. And there was no balance. Now that we're seeing companies really having a competitive advantage around hybrid workforce, we're having some employers still missing the mark and being tone deaf around, we should be hybrid. We should be remote. We should be offering different ways where our employees can have flexible schedules. So I think in the absence of that is where you're seeing people still feeling burned out because we have employers not really baking that into their talent strategy and not having the right conversations. So yeah, there should be a turn and a pivot for organizations like Bluebird. We're having the conversations now around being intentional with a hybrid workforce and making sure that as a diverse organization, we can recruit from all 50 states and offer a balanced work day for our team. So that is where we're seeing kind of that skyrocket still happening when those conversations are not happening.
That's very interesting.
But
Yeah, and
I think to
Janet.
layer onto that, it is a combination of everything you said, Louise. I think what the pandemic did, fortunately, it gave us this flexibility that we didn't think we were capable
Yeah,
of executing,
yeah,
right?
Mhm.
So we found out we could execute remotely and produce results. But the unfortunate part is, and I think we knew it before the pandemic, but it got, I think, exacerbated as a result of the pandemic, is when you are working remotely, if you are working from your home, you will work differently, right? You're not going to go to the break room because the break room is your house, right? You're not going to go walk to lunch because you're going to sit at your desk and you're going to eat and be typing maybe in a different way if you were around other people and Andrea comes to me and say, hey, Janet, you want to go get something to eat? That doesn't happen because you're
Yeah.
insulated working from home. And so
yeah,
working from home does not necessarily mean you won't get burned out. It
yeah,
could move it fast forward because you are in isolation. And so this hybrid notion of also being around people as well
Yeah.
has value, right? Because if you
absolutely.
just stay in your house, you will experience burnout. You won't move as much. You'll
That's
Mhm.
walk
right.
to the kitchen, back to your desk, to the
Yeah.
kitchen, back to your
And you
desk.
won't be able to confide in anyone. You fully
Exactly.
won't be
Right.
there.
That's
You
right.
know,
Right.
when you're at the coffee machine and you really
Right.
break down a task that's getting you
Exactly.
down,
That's
right?
right.
There is value in being around people. Maybe it doesn't
Mhm.
have to be 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, but there is value in it.
100%.
Absolutely. 100%.
I
And
think we're
there's
seeing that, aren't we? More and more now. There's a fact. Yeah, I was just going to say I saw that pop into the news feed, Rosie. So over to you.
yeah, I mean, Joseph Brown, he's one of our founders at Fraser Dove, and I totally agree with this statement. Is I do think technology is having an impact. It's
Mhm.
intrusive. We've got,
Yes.
instead
Yeah.
of having one phone, we've got two because you've got a work phone, and that means you're carrying your emails in your pocket with you
Yes.
24/7. Like the
Yes.
accessibility to those work related challenges, I don't want to say stresses, but those impactful emails that sometimes you accidentally open and it's ruined your day on the weekend
Yeah.
is
Mhm.
is
And,
is, is so true. And I
yeah.
want to kind of flip this into a question and say, in your workforce, how do you implement boundaries when it comes to the accessibility to technology? Do you think there's a way that we can get people to cut that down?
You know, I'll just give a funny example and then I'll turn it over to anybody that wants to jump in. But I had an employee and she didn't set boundaries. She would answer emails at 2 a.m. She would do it, and she was doing it as a means to say, I'm a really good employee, and she was excellent.
Yeah.
I finally said to her, if you answer another email at 2
Yeah.
and when I do your performance review, I am going to put something on that because you are not setting your boundaries.
Yes.
Yeah.
And, we laughed about it, but I was serious in the sense I need you to pull back some, and not
Mhm.
for
Hmm.
sake of the workplace, but for yourself, right?
Yeah.
And so you have to find ways to help your employees see that boundaries make us all better.
Yeah, because I
Hmm.
think sometimes the perception can be from employees that the more hours that they're putting in,
Absolutely.
the more productive or the more likely for promotion or the more they but often and out it's more about working smart
Yes.
Yes.
within the times that you've been given, not always the length of hours or at what time you're responding. But I think coming back to, Joseph's comment as well, it's not just the phone and the emails, it's the platforms. And,
Mhm.
whether it's MS Teams, whether it's Zoom, there is so many different platforms that people can communicate on now, even
Mhm.
from emails to LinkedIn, to
Mhm.
WhatsApp groups. I mean, it's just, it's more advanced than ever, isn't it? So it's having, setting those boundaries on those different platforms, which I completely agree. But we've got some more excellent questions. I think Zoe McCaskill's just popped in a comment here. If you work yourself into the ground, you risk one day
Yeah.
having nothing left for even yourself, let alone focus. Focus on meeting your needs first. And again, that comes back
Absolutely.
to self-care. Thank you for sharing that,
Yes.
Zoe.
Right.
Um, Completely agree. So I think we're almost coming up to our
Yeah, I was going to
45 minutes,
say.
which is just, it's
Wow.
flown.
It
It has
did.
absolutely flown
It
around.
is. It did.
And this point, we usually we actually leave it too late and overrun, but I think we've
I know
caught it
we
at the
do.
perfect time, Louise.
I
We're
know.
learning, we're learning.
We're learning.
But I think we're going to ask the question that we ask all our guests at the end of um, these broadcasts. And thank you everyone for your questions. I wish we had had
Yes.
time to get through them all. It's been a really interactive and engaging discussion today.
Mhm,
And we will go back. We'll have a look at the questions. We can always set up more ways to
mhm.
answer them. But let's go to Janet first. What is the best piece of advice that you've been given? And I suppose we can maybe tie it into the theme today and say, what's one piece of advice that you've been given or that you'd give your younger self now
Give your
to
younger selves
avoid
a good one. Yes.
burning out and continue to
Good.
shine bright?
Mm.
I think the best advice that I would have given my younger self is self care. It's what Andrea said at the outset, that I don't think I understood that I could have it and still be successful at the same time. And what it did for me as I learned that over my career journey was setting boundaries.
Yeah.
So I'm just a firm believer that you have to do that. It doesn't mean you don't have some long nights sometime or some
Mhm.
early days, but it is not supposed to be every day,
That's
right?
beautiful.
And I think communicating those expectations professionally to your management is key. And then modeling what you say you are going to do. So if that means Monday and Wednesdays, you're going to the gym. I am leaving at 4. I can get
Mhm.
back online at 6 p.m., but from 4 to 5 is my time. And
Mhm.
that is what I think everyone needs to do for themselves to keep themselves whole.
Yes. Lovely. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that, Janet. And similar then for you, Andrea, what's the best bit of advice you'd give your younger self, do you think?
I would tell my younger self to look back at everything you've accomplished and you're doing good. You're doing great. I think sometimes we forget to just give ourselves a pat on the back for how far that we've come. And if
Yeah.
I could give any advice to the audience, look back where you were 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Write a letter to your past self about everything that you've accomplished. I think sometimes the burnout comes from feeling that you're not doing enough, when in
100%.
reality you're exactly where you're supposed to be. So keep
Mhm.
moving forward and reflect on all the wonderful work that you've done because you're doing great.
I
I
love
love
that.
that.
Reflection, recognition, self-care.
Yeah.
They're the three
Yep.
phrases. And I think wrapping into the self-care, and something I've always been a believer in, I've talked a lot with my teams about, is, every quarter taking a break. You have allocated annual leave, and don't just leave it to the back end of the year, because
Yep.
that is a big sign of burnout. If I see
Yes.
somebody that's working, kind of really hard, are getting exhausted, and they haven't had a break for 4 months, it's kind of like, go and have a break, go and
Yeah,
take
go
a
on
holiday.
holiday.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
um
So, I think that's a really, just a big one from my perspective. But everybody, I just wanted to say, because I'm sure Rosie's also seeing this as well, but we've got some, great comments. So thank you. Great conversation from Georgina. Thank you for this fantastic session from Nikita. Rosie, are you seeing them too?
Yeah, they're flying
Yeah,
in. Lovely discussions. Great points to take home and install with the team. That's exactly what we're here for.
yeah,
But
exactly.
while we get all these thank you notes up,
Hmm.
obviously thank you so much for engaging. We're going to put the lift up community page in the comments feed, so please go and join our members. Our members group has got up to 700 now, and they do release independent content there that is only accessible as if you're in that page. It's free, it's
Yes.
accessible to all, and it's really good where we're going to start driving a lot
Yeah.
of the communication and comms. You'll be able to speak live with some of our live guests
100%. I
at the
think,
time.
yeah, over the last 7 months, haven't we, Rosie? We've seen that from the back of this, people have been connected to those now in the community, and having relationships with those that they didn't even, kind of had no existed before. And actually, I think both of you, Andrea and Janet, you're kind of not far from each other, are you, near Chicago? Which is lovely. So I
Almost
think
right around
that's,
the corner.
yeah, exactly. So, yeah, thank you so much. Thank you. We've got here great platform the relational engagement and emoji reactions can certainly attest to how impactful this has been. Lovely to speak on a personal level. We've got Darcy. Thank you for joining us today. Great discussion. I mean, yeah, thank you, Michael, as well, for your question earlier, and the same with you, Holly. Great discussion. So yeah, overwhelmed actually with the amount of comments coming through. So thank you again. Please reshare, get connected into the community group, as Rosie's mentioned. It's been absolutely fabulous to have both Andrea and Janet on. So a huge
Thank
thank
you.
you to you both
Thanks
for
so much.
joining. And we're kind of overdue now, so I better log off. But thank you to my co-host Rosie,
Thank you.
and enjoy the rest of your day. Oh, thanks, audience. Bye bye.
Thanks. Bye
Thank
bye.